Hello and welcome to Wisconsin in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm JD Davidson, regional editor for the Center Square. Dan McCaleb has the day off. Joining me as always today is Ben Yount, Wisconsin correspondent for the Center Square. Ben, how are things?
Well, it is the day before Thanksgiving and things are not good. I've got so much chopping and slicing and grating and prepping to do. That and I was just informed that we've got shirt tail relatives coming who have some rather specific liquor requests. So as soon as we're done here, it's to the liquor store because, of course, that is what Thanksgiving means in Wisconsin.
The liquor request can be good, though. That always tends to help me out for the excuse to go to the liquor store.
A lot of that is my liquor request so that I can deal with these people.
Sure. We are recording this on Wednesday, November 22nd, 2023. And Ben, school choice is back in the news in Wisconsin. What's the latest?
Well, this has been an ongoing thing. Wisconsin and school choice have been synonymous for 20, 30 years, and Wisconsin is in many ways a national leader, and it has proven very successful in this state, which means that teachers' unions and the Democratic politicians who support teachers' unions have hated school choice for almost 30 years. And earlier in the year, we saw a massive expansion of school choice. Republicans were able to get a funding increase included in the new state budget. And while this governor, who was the former state superintendent, who is supported wildly by teachers' unions, didn't necessarily like it, he accepted it as part of a grand bargain. That was the first half of the year when we wrote about school choice here in Wisconsin. Since then, all eyes have been on a lawsuit from, how do I best put this, a progressive activist, brewing company owner, and often losing candidate by the name of Kirk Bangstad. He owns the Minocqua Brewing Company. And Minocqua, if you're taking a look at the map, it's about halfway up the state. And he is a dyed-in-the-wool progressive. He admits it. He does not like school choice in the least. And now that there is a liberal majority Supreme Court, Bangstad filed a lawsuit that claims school choice is unconstitutional. He has found some plaintiffs, some parents across the state, and they are asking the Supreme Court to strike down school choice, saying that it violates the state's taxing code and essentially an equal protection clause, that school choice students get state money. Therefore, Bangstad argues local school districts get less when kids take advantage of school choice. The shocking headline, because there were three that we wrote about at the Center Square this week. One of them was that Will, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, asked the Supreme Court to join the case. They wanted to intervene because Will is a huge supporter of school choice and represents a number of school choice parents. They asked the Supreme Court if they could join the case as well. The shocking headline was something we wrote last week when even the governor, Tony Evers, again, the former superintendent of school, no fan of school choice, wrote a brief with the Supreme Court that said, yeah, this lawsuit's not all on the level. This lawsuit asks too much and goes too far. And the Evers administration, while not stepping up and defending school choice, said there is no emergency here. This is not something that the Supreme Court must take up as soon as possible. And so when you have the governor of the state on sort of whose behalf Kirk Bangstad is suing, walking away from this case, it is telling, and it shows just how far Bangstad and anti-school choicers are willing to go, that they're willing to cross a bridge that not even traditional anti-school choicers are willing to follow.
I did find it really interesting that the governor and the House Speaker, a Democrat and a Republican, both filed relatively similar briefs to say this isn't an emergency. Let's let the process work as the process is supposed to work through the court system. The governor didn't go as far as to say, the merits of this case doesn't hold up. The speaker obviously did, but for the two of them to join and say, if we're going to challenge this, let's do this the right way. And for an activist like this, and I don't want to step on your toes, but in your story, you reported that he's also trying to fundraise off this thing. The longer this drags out, the less benefit he gains personally from this.
We talked about this in the immediate aftermath of Janet Protasewicz's election to the Wisconsin Supreme Court back in the spring. There's a reason that race was the most expensive and still is, because we haven't had another one, but is the most expensive Supreme Court race ever in the history of the United States. $50 million spent to elect one justice to the Supreme Court, because the idea is that liberals saw an opportunity to flip the court, to go from a 4-3 conservative majority to a 4-3 liberal majority. And when that happened, we had conversations here on Wisconsin in Focus and just throughout the state of there's been a decade-long wish list from Democrats, from liberals, from progressives in Wisconsin of things that they don't like, things that they could never change legislatively. Because again, remember, while there is a Democratic governor, there is a very strong, almost veto-proof majority of Republicans in the legislature. So unless it's something that the governor can order, Democrats in Wisconsin have been shut out. And on that list, of course, was the state's abortion law. That's already being challenged. You have redistricting, which I'm sure we'll talk about next week on Wisconsin in Focus. School choice is on that list of things that Democrats have not liked for years. Act 10, which changed how teachers in the state could renegotiate their contracts. You also have right to work, concealed carry. There are all manners of things that activists like Kirk Bangstad have been waiting to try and challenge, and they see this as their opportunity. And we found the quote in a fundraising email that he had, and it is again telling. He wrote, "We need the Supreme Court to take up this case now," in all caps, because there's a real possibility that the uncorrupted Supreme Court majority that we worked so hard to achieve by electing Janet Protasewicz last April won't be around in 2025 after the next Supreme Court election takes place. If we take this case slowly, it might not make it to the Supreme Court until 2025, and there's a 50% chance, like every election in our swing state, he wrote, that the court will become corrupted again and fall back into the pockets of Betsy DeVos's school choice lobby. And that is, again, the word telling, I know we used it too much in this sentence, but the idea that there is a constitutional crisis that the Wisconsin Supreme Court has to address with school choice. Bangstad's argument are kids are being harmed. We have to act before the next school year because these children are being harmed. When he is writing that in public and then to supporters saying, we got to get this case to the Supreme Court now because there's another election coming up in less than 2 years and we may lose that one, it undercuts the argument that this is an emergency. And so even the governor of the state of Wisconsin, who is no fan of school choice, be sure of that, even the governor of the state of Wisconsin can't stand by and back this claim that, oh my gosh, there is a constitutional emergency around school choice that must be decided by only the Supreme Court as soon as possible.
Well, this will be interesting. And unfortunately, Ben, that's all the time we have today. And absolutely, this will be a continued point of conversation. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Ben Yount, I'm JD Davidson. Thanks for listening, and please subscribe.